Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Rotary Club of Madison. I am Jason Elstrip, your new club president. Well, I'm glad you're clapping at the beginning. We'll see if you're clapping in June. We'll see if you're clapping. Thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we start today's meeting on a sad note. The first meeting announcement is the death of a member, Jim Ruley, who passed away on July 2nd at the age of 81. Jim was one of the pillar members of our club and dedicated a great deal of his life to Rotary during his 51 years of membership. He served on our board 2 terms as Sergeant-at-Arms and as club president. He served as our program chair for 10 years and chaired many other major committees. He was also a member of our kitchen fellowship group for many years. Jim was a recipient of our highest award recognition, the Joseph G. Werner Award in 2015 for his dedicated service to our Rotary Club. He's also a Paul Harris Fellow. We made a $100 gift in Jim's memory to the Madison Rotary Foundation to establish a memorial fund in his name. Anyone wishing to make a gift to this fund may send their contributions to the Rotary office. We extend our deepest sympathies to Jim's wife, Carol, and their family. Let's pause for a moment of silence in memory of our longtime Rotary friend, Jim Ruley. Thank you. Please remain standing, and we're going to hear our patriotic song from the Bartell Duo. We need a good name for you all. Yeah, the Bartell Duo will do. We're going to start, though, with Angela Bartell. She is the headliner in this group. Will lead us in the singing of My Country, 'Tis of Thee, with Jeff Bartell on the keyboard, and then will lead us in singing of What a Wonderful World.
Sing. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Be seated, please. What a Wonderful World. Everybody remembers Louis Armstrong's rendition, but I think it's we can sing it in tribute to Jim Ruley as well, our dear friend and fellow Rotarian. I never saw him without a smile, I'll tell you that. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, and also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Rest in peace, Jim Ruley.
Thank you very much to the Bartels and a wonderful tribute to our good friend Jim Ruley. The sponsor for today's meeting is Ann DeVaser and the DoubleTree by Hilton Milwaukee. Ann, are you here today? Can you please stand? There's Ann. Ann joined our club in 2005 and is the president of DeVaser Investment, Inc. The DoubleTree by Hilton Milwaukee is located in downtown Milwaukee on West Wisconsin Avenue and managed by DeVaser Investments. This renowned hotel is known for its exceptional service and prime location. It's just steps away from Marquette University, the Fiserv Forum, and the Baird Convention Center. The DoubleTree by Hilton Milwaukee proudly announces its role as a host for the national media guests and delegates from Indiana during the 2024 Republican National Convention. The hotel recognizes the important role it plays in showcasing the great state of Wisconsin to the world during this very special opportunity. A huge thanks to Ann and the DoubleTree Hotel Milwaukee for sponsoring today's luncheon. Thank you, Ann. Next up, we have guest introductions with Mr. Mark Clear, and I want to borrow that shirt. I like it a lot.
Not right now. That is not going to happen. Before I introduce today's guests, I have to embarrass/promote our new club president. If you have not yet picked up a copy of this month's Isthmus, see, this is self-serving as well. There is a little bit of a profile of our new club president that does mention his new role and perhaps some future roles for him. So I think this should start a tradition of something embarrassing for Jason every week. And actually, you probably can get that taken care of by yourself, so we should be good. If you have not yet picked up a copy of Isthmus, there are copies at the back table. So much for members in the news. And we do have some wonderful guests today who I will now introduce. And guests, as I say your name, please rise and remain standing so that we can recognize you as a group after all the guests have been read. David Smith is a guest of the previously mentioned Ann DeVaser. Mary Batari is a guest of Linda Vacunta. Joe Shermer is a guest of Maria Haiti. Darren Ike is a guest of Paul Ryman, as is Joe Plasterer and Melinda Starkweather. Michelle Conley is a guest of Peter Gray, as is Michael Henry, guest of Peter Gray. Jeremy Lyons, a guest of Rhonda Adams. Mia Saunders is a guest of Rowan Childs. Braden Fu is a guest of the Rye Committee, and Carl Bryan is a guest of Al Bryan. Please join me in welcoming all of our guests. Just keep that open for the whole meeting.
You're right, I will do plenty of embarrassing of myself, but I don't mind. If you all want to embarrass me all year long, so be it. All right, we have a lot of guests in the room, which I think we mean we have a bunch of potential members, but we also have 3 new members today. Some exciting news. Please, it's my pleasure to introduce 3 new members. First, will Lisa Birkenthal please stand with her sponsor, Lee Richardson. Oh, all right. One person's very excited. Yes. Lisa is retired prenatal genetic counselor. She was born in Englewood, New Jersey, and came to Madison in 2019. Lisa has 3 adult children. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology from Keene College and a master's degree in human genetics from Sarah Lawrence College. She is a member of the American Society for Human Genetics, the National Society for Genetic Counselors, and the Human Genetics Association of New Jersey. Lisa volunteers for the River Food Pantry and the American Red Cross, as well as the Goodman Community Center. She enjoys reading, exercising, and cooking. Please remain standing. Next up, we have Allison Liebwall. Please stand with your sponsors, Darren Harris, Laura Hicklin, Aaron Mullins, and James Ty. I should have basically just said, if you are not a sponsor, you have a lot of friends, please stand. Well, Allison, I like how you come in style. Allison is the owner and principal consultant with Allison Liebwall Consulting, where she designs and facilitates strategic planning events and critical conversations with internal and external stakeholders. She is a native of Ossining, Ossining, New York, thank you very much, and now makes her home in Madison with her husband, with her partner, Tobin Morrison. She holds a bachelor's degree from Williams College, an MBA degree from Yale University, and an MFA degree from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. In her spare time, Allison enjoys hanging out with her 5 children and stepchildren, reading novels, playing board games, and exploring Wisconsin's many state, county, and city parks. Welcome, Allison. Remain standing, and will Constanza Mateus please stand with your sponsor, Paul Riemann. Constanza is the president and owner of Arte Insight Consulting, and she was born in Bogota, Colombia, and came to Madison to attend UW-Madison, where she earned a BBA degree with double major in finance, investment, and banking, as well as marketing with a specialization in international business. She is the first woman president of the Financial Management Association at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and she is the first woman to teach the Cap Gemini America's worldwide university in Behoost, France. Constanza has one teenage child. Her interests include traveling, history, architecture, biking, and hiking. Please join me in welcoming our great 3 new members to the Rotary Club of Madison. Welcome, 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 Constanza, Allison, and Lisa. We are very excited to have you as part of our club. I'm not going to do this bit, but I'll do it once. Charles says when you have your Rotary pin, which I have on today for the first time in quite a long time, you get into any club worldwide, 43,000 clubs across the entire world. So welcome, welcome to the club. Next up, we've got to talk about hosting opportunities with, speaking of Rotary International, our good friend Ed Fuda, who chairs this club's Rotary International Programs Committee, and he has a quick announcement. Welcome to the stage, Ed.
Thank you, brand new President Jason. And for the first meeting, I'd like to ask if anybody in this room remembers the new presidential theme. Yes, the magic of Rotary. Thank you. And I'd like to give a demonstration of the magic of Rotary. Yeah. No.
Are you going to make me disappear?
Watch it, because there's somebody taking notes on bloopers, and it's already started at this meeting. Well, first of all, I'd like to bring to you the magic of Rotary through bringing your international service dimension opportunity to you without leaving Madison or Wisconsin. On your tables, you'll find a yellow sheet that explains the exchange that our past district governor, Michelle, was on in the country of Croatia. Now, we're not asking you to all go to Croatia. They can't host you right now. But we have the team from Croatia, as you see, visiting Madison, visiting Wisconsin, but they're going to visit Madison for 3 days. And you see the opportunities to participate in international service, which is an essential dimension of your membership in Rotary. Remember on that pin that President Jason just mentioned, there are just 2 words. What are they? Read your pin if you don't know. 2 words. Rotary International. It doesn't say the Rotary Club of Madison, etc. It's just Rotary International. The Rotary Club of Madison, you're not a member of Rotary International. You're a member of the Rotary Club of Madison. The Rotary Club of Madison is an autonomous entity that has membership in Rotary International. So you're a member of the Madison Rotary Club. And for you to fulfill your international service dimension, read the yellow sheet. Croatia is a country of 3.6 million people and approximately 21,800 square miles across from the Adriatic Sea from Italy. The state of Wisconsin has a population of approximately, for those that don't know, 5.9 million people and 54,151 square miles. So we don't exactly parallel Croatia, but we have a lot in common. Croatians speak mainly Croatian and English. A vast majority of people in Croatia speak English and several other languages. So please look at the details of your hosting ability. You don't necessarily need to be a home host, but you can participate in the hosting of these visitors to our town. So please take a look at this and consider really extending the magic of Rotary in your international service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed, very much. Next up, we have Peter Covey, who chairs this year's Innovation Grants Committee, and he has an announcement. Here comes Peter from the back corner.
Thank you, President Jason. Picked a bad day to sit in the back corner. Hi, I'm Peter Cavey, and I'd like to talk a little bit about our grants committee. So you may remember that we made a couple of changes to our grants committee process. We're kind of in two groups now. One is we give, it's called the Excellence in Education Grant Program, and we give a few gifts to larger gifts to educational programs, and that's being chaired by Becky Steinhoff. Thank you, Becky, and they're in the process of evaluation as we speak. The second one is the Innovation Grants program, okay? And so, you know, if you're familiar with the Grants Committee program, one of the toughest things to fund is things that have no traction yet. You know, a nonprofit will say, we're looking for money to get this thing started. Well, those are really hard dollars to come by. So Rotary is stepping in to help in that regard. I'm chairing that, committee this year, and so we're kicking off now. All right, so we're sending out. We sent out grant applications pretty much to everybody that got one last year and everybody that we're kind of aware of. But we would ask for your help. An innovation grant is geared towards nonprofit organizations that are trying something new, not like incrementally different, but something kind of a new idea that they haven't tried before, that they want to seed and try to get off the ground. If you are familiar with an organization like that, we would encourage you to apply for a grant. The applications can be found online. We have a couple at the back table over there, and also, you know, Pat, of course, all roads end at Pat Jenkins. So, you know, if you need something, just let her know. So, if you have any questions, call Pat, call me. But we're looking for some really high quality applications, and if you could help us out, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, very much. This is when I apologize to the camera crew, because I'm going to be all over the floor this year. All right, we're going to do something new. We're going to find someone random, not so random today, and say, what are you thankful for? That's it. That easy. We're going to start with our good friend and Bass Club president, Paul Riemann, who has an excellent idea about membership. This is the year of membership. We are going to grow this club to a place it was before. We are only as good as our members. We're so excited to welcome these three, but we're going to triple that number every single month. So, Paul, what's your idea?
Well, thank you, Jason. Messages come to us, ideas, and here I am. This was just a few days ago. Got to talk to Jason, so here goes. For membership, my question to start is, who knows what a BHAG, B-H-A-G is? Yes? Right, big, hairy, audacious goal. Now, I hadn't heard that in a long time, and it was just recently that Joe and Melinda, my guests, had brought it up. And would one of you share what the BHAG for your organization is?
Yeah, I'm the talker, so forgive me. Our BHAG at Serious Change Readiness is to help 1 million teams master change so they can own their future.
So I heard that. It's like, oh my goodness. And so came to me, it's like, well, what if we had a BHAG for the club? What's importantly is not what I'm going to say, or this goal is, does it resonate for you, and is something you think? So did you know that the club bylaws have a max? Our club can't be over a certain number, and I thought it was 530. It's 550. And so, talking with James Ty, who's the member recruitment chair, and Jason, we said, let's go for 500. So the goal is 500 members in this club by May, end of May, because we don't want to wait till June, because what if we have a couple that we want to catch up on? And so that's our BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. How do we do it? We're talking, we need 12, anywhere between 10 and 12 members per month. What do you say? Let's do it. Okay? And so the last part, part of the message was like, yeah, and you should contribute. Something that I'm saying is that when we achieve this by the end of May, 500 members, that I'm going to put down $4,000, $2,000 to our Rotary Foundation, and $2,000 to Rotary International. And I encourage any of you to think, like, if we do that, maybe you do it, and maybe there's a way to do that, let people know that you're doing that, or do it anonymously. Thank you.
Well, I am thankful for Paul. Paul never answered the question about what he's thankful for, but it's new members. New members, Paul, you're not going to get away because we have one bonus question. Uh-oh. What is your favorite experience in downtown Madison?
All right. It's even on Facebook. It's with Jim Ruley. And the short version is, I'm a new member, I go to a board meeting, I meet Jim, and you learn he's doing all the overture work, and next thing he's standing next to me like, would you like more butter? What a guy.
That's a good experience. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to match his goal. I'm not going to do financial because I'm currently paying for daycare. All your parents understand. But I pledge to bring in 10 members myself this year. So let's get to 500 again. All right. Yes, give me a portable mic and I'm going to walk around. All right. The new membership roster is now available. There are a few printed copies right in the front near the button box for anyone who prefers a printed copy. The roster is also available in a PDF format on our website. Once you've logged into our website, you can find the roster under Club Documents section. Jane is now showing a screenshot of where you can find the roster online in the same format as our printed roster. All right, on to birthdays. We have 2 weeks of birthdays since we were not meeting last week. To celebrate this week, members can share a message with a bit of humor or wisdom that complements Rotary's mission. We also encourage members to give a gift to our foundation's Community Grants Endowment Fund that represents their age, rounded up to 100, for our Synergy Scholarship Fund. Last week's birthdays are June 30th, Lee Schwartz. July 1st, Paul Gesner. July 2nd, Lou Bernhardt. July 2nd, Steve Goldberg. Of course he has something to say. Thanks. That's a compliment. Oh, boy. There goes the first joke. Thanks to each and every one of you for attending my birthday luncheon today. I'm deeply sorry that I cannot join you, but I'm sure you will have a wonderful time. Happy birthday to me. See? Okay. July 2nd, Oscar Morales quotes George Bernard Shaw, "We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing." Absolutely. July 3rd, Annette Helmer. July 3rd, Patrick Marsden. July 4th, Ted Crabb. July 4th, Trip Witter, who shares from President, not U.S. President James Garfield, excuse me, the truth shall make you free, but first, it makes you miserable. That's true. And this week's birthdays, we have July 10th, Kirsten Houghton. July 10th, Wendy Wink. July 12th, Jeff Tubbs. July 13th, Cheryl DeMars, who says, I was saddened to hear the passing of our fellow Rotarian Jim Ruley. I will always remember his kindness and generosity, agreeing to play Santa Claus when we delivered Christmas presents to children at the road home. We later stopped by Lou Harnet's for a glass of scotch. Jim taught me no ice. I will miss you, Jim. Thanks to our celebrants and their contributions to the Madison Rotary Foundation Community Grants Endowment Fund. Please join me in wishing them a happy birthday. I like that. A little extra frosting on the keys today, Mr. Bartel. I like that. See, that's a joke about birthday cake. It's always funny when you have to explain the joke. All right. Dead silence. All right, on to our program. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Professor Alexander Shashko. He grew up in Madison and is a UW-Madison alumni. He is currently a lecturer in the University of Wisconsin Department of Afro-American Studies. He teaches a history of black popular music from the blues to hip-hop and the history of the civil rights movement. His classes are generally packed, and he's won many teaching awards, including the Honored Instructor Award from University Housing. Well, this is really cool. He is one of the voters for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Oh, wow. Yes, it is a heavy burden. Professor Shashko will talk today about the greatest African-American musicians of the 1960s and 70s, both chronicled and inspired by the social activism of the time and inspired by activists and artists alike. The title of his speech is Ribbon in the Sky, Soul, Funk, and the Enduring Power of Black Art. We look forward to Professor Shashko's presentation and made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thanks for speaking with us today. I also want to mention that we'll have Q&A at the end, and I will be the one with the mic. So let's welcome Professor Alexander Shashko to our podium. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you to Janet and Jane and Jeff for their hospitality today, and to all of you for being here. I will try to talk about a very big topic dear to my heart in a very short period of time. I'll do the very best I can to keep it brief. And here's where I want to start. What I really want to talk about today is listening. And this is a group of people who have achieved a wide array of success in your lives in a variety of different disciplines. But to get to a point where most of you are managers, administrators, leaders in one form or another means that you have had to spend some time learning the art of listening. And that may be particularly challenging if you made it to that point because you were very good at talking or speaking or saying what you want to say, which is something that is my job. So I certainly understand the challenge that comes with quiet and with listening. But it's important to listen, of course. It's important to pay attention to other people. Not only is it important to listen to other people so that you can learn about them, but it's important because they see things, hear things, know things that you don't, and you can then use that in your positions of leadership, right? You can use that to make the things that you are trying to do better. What does all of that have to do with Stevie Wonder and Aretha Franklin and George Clinton of Parliament Funkadelic? Well, the reason it matters is because African American music has always been at the heart of how African Americans have been attempting to tell the rest of America their story. to tell the rest of America about what it means to be African American in the United States, about how to define Black identity, Black community, and how to talk about that relationship and how it affects the country, and how the ways in which our country has been structured and ordered historically has affected the way in which African Americans experience this place. That story goes back as far as the moment when the enslaved were first brought to North America. And it continues on throughout the era of slavery and into the era of Jim Crow segregation in the 19th and the first half of the 20th century. Music is a fundamental way in which African Americans have tried to express their concerns, tried to define themselves, and tried to talk about politics in this country. And there's a very simple reason why that is the case. There are other reasons that are also important. For example, in African culture, music has always served as a primary form of communication. But in the United States, African Americans historically did not have access to public discourse. All the way until the end of slavery, of course, they were not citizens at all. They were barely treated as human beings. And even after that, into the era of Jim Crow segregation and beyond, African Americans historically did not have the right to vote. They did not have the right to run for office in many places. They did not have access to capital or opportunity. They were not on the staff of newspapers or radio stations or television stations, and to the degree they were, they often didn't have a level of influence that their white counterparts might have. The point of all of that is to say that those traditional forms of communication, those traditional ways in which the rest of America assumes people are going to participate in politics, was not widely available to African Americans. And because it was not widely available to African Americans, they had to express themselves in another way. And it was through music and art and literature and public conversation that they expressed themselves. The early slave owners understood this. They banned music, they banned the drum on the plantations because they knew that music was a powerful form of communication, one that could organize and unite people of African descent and could make their expression public in a way that they didn't want it to be. But of course, there was no denying music. There was no way of hiding music forever. And it became a powerful way in which African Americans have expressed themselves over time. They do it in a number of different ways, in a number of different forms. I obviously cannot get into all of those things today. But I can talk about a couple. First, there's gospel, right? The music of the church. And the music of the church and its relationship to African Americans is a complicated one because originally the slave owners wanted the slaves to be Christian as a means of control, to tell them a story of the Bible that was defined by an all-knowing God, an all-powerful God who had determined your place in advance in the world, right? It was a way of explaining in a kind of religious form how it is that the enslaved are where they are and to make them comfortable that that might be the case. But of course, African Americans themselves took much more than that away from that experience of being in the churches, because there's another set of stories in the Bible about liberation and about freedom and about the poor and about the oppressed and about striving for freedom. And they took those stories, and from those stories, they built gospel and gospel music in the black church. Another form is the blues that emerges out of the slave songs and the field hollers that come out of the American South in the Mississippi Delta. We don't exactly know where the blues started or how it started, but it did. And when it did, it told a story of survival. If gospel was the story of hoping for perfecting the world, for achieving what the Bible might say that it does, or what the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence says that it might be, the blues was just about survival. How do you get through this world as it is? Coming from people who were living in abject poverty, it means sometimes crying to get through that day. It means sometimes laughing and dancing to get through that day. But it's about survival. And that's the story that it told. And then there's jazz, born out of the world of gospel and the blues, a sound that was built around innovation, about not just saying we're stuck with the world as it is, not just saying that we can live up to our ideals, but maybe we can change the rules. Maybe we can make it better. We can imagine a different place. The jazz music, to the ears of most when it first emerged, was noise. It was clatter. It didn't sound right because it didn't obey the rules of Western music. The rhythms, the notes, the chord progressions, they all were considered noise until they weren't. Until they were considered music, because in fact, those jazz performers did remake the world in that sense, redefine what might be good or bad. And so you have this idea of gospel and the blues and jazz, of survival, of redemption, and of innovation that all become primary strands in the story of black music. By the time you get into the 1960s and the 1970s, of course, you've already had the civil rights movement which preceded it in the 1950s, a revolution in music that happened along the way with rhythm and blues and rock and roll, a new generation that was expressing itself and expressing a desire for freedom, whether it was individual or collective, through that music, music that was fundamentally African American. And by the 60s and 70s, that idea and those ideals of gospel redemption in particular, but blues survival and jazz innovation as well, those two were now part of the American conversation. It's through black music, even more in some ways than through the politics itself, that became part of the conversation about America. Do African Americans deserve to have the same opportunities? Are we as a country going to live up to our ideals? Are we going to try to make it a better place? These were all the stories that were being told through the music. Right? The music of Sam Cooke, who comes out of the gospel singing tradition, the music of Motown, an aspirational sound designed by Berry Gordy and performed by the likes of Marvin Gaye or the Supremes, that was a celebration of black identity, of black joy, but also an audition of sorts to say to white America, this is what black greatness looks like and we should be part of this country. It's the sound of Stax Records and Southern Soul from Muscle Shoals, expressing how that music from the church and the music of the blues exists in the minds and the sounds of a younger generation in the 1960s. The sounds of Curtis Mayfield coming out of Chicago, coming out of the gospel tradition, and of course, towering above all of them, Aretha Franklin, who herself becomes not just an iconic figure in the story of black liberation, but also an iconic figure in the story of women's liberation, and plays both of those roles and challenges the way in which the rules work for women as well as for African Americans. What that story has had as a consistent part of its message from beginning to end is a sense of joy, a sense of finding escape from the toils of the world, but also a willingness to engage the world. Music is always going to be about, escapism. It's always going to be about fun, right? I mean, part of the reason we listen to music is to get away from the experiences that we are having. Probably 90% of all pop songs are always going to be about romance and love and sex, no matter what. That's what's on the minds of people, or it's what gets them off their minds, right? That's what they're about. But not all of them. And actually, a lot of those songs that are about love are also about all these big things too, about building community, about having dignity. All of those things are part of the story as well. This is a story in terms of the music that has lived on to this day. And when I talk about the way in which the legacy of black art is in such high standing, we all live in America, at least culturally, under the umbrella of black music. That is not to deny the traditions of music that come from elsewhere. They are powerful in and of themselves. And if I had more than 20 minutes to talk, I could tell you in great detail what they are. But they are all under the umbrella, ultimately, of the story of black music and African American music. Not only that, it is the default music of the planet. There are reasons for that, too. that are about technology, that are about American power, that are about the rise of radio and television coinciding with the rise of the United States. But it's also about the fact that this story is a story that people can relate to and understand all over the world. And that the music not only is grounded in rhythm and melody, but has a remarkable ability, like African Americans themselves, to adapt to the world around them, to innovate, right? To deal with the moment in a way that has grounding in certain ideals and values, but also a willingness to adapt in that moment. All of those things are crucially important to the story of black music and why it has been so powerful. I'm going to pivot here for a moment, though, to conclude and go back to listening, because that was a very broad, very quick piece of history about why black music is so important and why the music of soul and funk in the 60s and 70s matters so much. And now I want to challenge all of you to think about what that means in the world that you live in today. In a world where we have a remarkable gap in the way in which older people and younger people perceive this world. A gap that it is undeniably also about race and is also about life experience in America and opportunity. And about trying to listen to those younger generations that are trying to navigate this world at this particular very perilous moment in our history. Music is one of the ways in which you can hear what they have to say. They may feel like they cannot make it to the higher levels at this moment of our public discourse, but they can say it through music. They always have said it through music, and African American young people have always said it through music as well. That music, I'm going to go ahead and guess, for most of you, sounds like noise. It sounds like a ruckus. It sounds like just impenetrable at times, right? So did jazz, so did the blues, so did gospel, so did rock and roll, so did R&B, so did soul, funk, disco, you name it. It sounded like noise to people who didn't grow up with it. But it's music. And that music is singing the same kind of songs that were sung before. One of the ways in which you can understand and connect to the music that your kids or your grandkids or your great-grandkids are listening to that may sound like noise to you is to stop paying attention to the rhythm and stop paying attention to the melody and start listening to what they're saying in the song. Because it's the same story. It's the same story of survival. It's the same story of searching for redemption. It's the search for love. It is the search for innovation and making the world a new and a different place. They are all part of it. And what that means, for example, is understanding that if there's a whole style of music that you do not like, the problem is you. Because there is something of value in it. The problem is you. There's something of value in it, and you just have to find it, either by understanding that these longer parts of the musical tradition are important, or by understanding that there's going to be something of value there because people would not be listening to it if there wasn't. If there wasn't anything of value there, they would not be listening to it. And the truth of the matter is that every survey that has ever been done by the record labels or by academia says that by the age of 30, most people stop listening to new music and they start listening primarily to older music. And so the challenge then becomes for most of us, myself included, where it's my job to pay attention to younger music, is to try to transcend that. And so I hope that what you take away from these very brief comments is this idea that if you want to understand something of the black experience, of black politics today, if you want to understand better how the complexity of our world it works, and to have a window into that world, or to have a better window into the world that you are part of, then you can do a lot worse than listening to the music. Because if nothing else, there may be hard lessons to learn in there, but it's usually a joy to hear. With that, I'll take some questions. Thank you very much.
Nice deal. How are you? I'm good. Thank you for coming, Professor. The power of the music as an art form, undeniable. Music is part of show business. Most, other than Motown, I believe most of the record companies and labels that were producing the music were owned by whites. Chess, Stax, Sun, so on. Did the white owners and producers enable the black musicians? Did they, at any time, thwart the message? Did they allow the message to go out unimpeded? What was the interaction between the white power structure and the black musicians?
How much time you got? I mean, that's a complicated question, and it really depends to some degree on the circumstances. So the long history of the record industry is the long history of artists being fleeced for their work. And that is true for artists in general, that they, in general, do not get paid to this day what they probably deserve given what they produce in terms of profit. In the streaming world that we are in right now, artists get fractions of a penny every time a song is played. Fractions of a penny. So we're talking about a situation that still largely exists for all musicians, but for African American musicians who often had very few opportunities, had very little leverage, they often signed contracts that were terrible in terms of the amount of money that they were going to make. They often signed away their rights to the music. And they often had real restrictions on what kind of music they were creating. There's a term that's used to talk about African American music. It applies to a bunch of other things too, called masking, and that is the idea of writing a song that is ostensibly about one broad topic that everyone can understand, but which has a kind of subtext that only a particular audience can hear. It's a bit like dog whistle politics, right? That you talk about the dog whistle, it means only certain people can hear what's in those messages. Of course, it doesn't have that kind of negative connotation. And in case of masking, the most obvious example of it is that, I mean, there are a bunch of rock and roll songs about sex that are actually kind of written so that they're about romance, but the teenagers knew the slang, and so they knew it was about sex, even if their parents did not. Well, songs like People Get Ready by Curtis Mayfield are the same thing, only they're about the civil rights movement. And so what black artists often did was to try to do the best they could to circumnavigate the record labels, to try to get around what white owners or white producers wanted them to do, because of course they wanted to maximize profit, and that wasn't always the case. There's always a tension in popular art between expression and profit, and they both exist. People want them both, including black artists. In fact, I would argue that most black artists were more interested in profit than their white counterparts because they were often coming from abject poverty and wanted to make a living at it. It wasn't a choice in the same way that it might be for some white artist who's coming from a middle-class background. And so there always has been this kind of tension between those two positions. Some record label owners were deeply involved and interested in the music. Ahmet Ertegun, for example, at Atlantic. Others couldn't have cared less. They could have been selling anything else, cans of coffee, and it would have meant the same thing to them. Sure.
How can you mention African American music without mentioning Louis Armstrong, who brought African American music to us for over 70 years?
Well, given that we sang his song today, that was definitely an oversight on my part, and my only explanation is that I had 20 minutes to summarize everything that I was going to say. I will say, Louis Armstrong, aside from him being really just one of the great geniuses of, I mean, if you have to do a Mount Rushmore of African American music in the 20th century, at minimum he's in the conversation, if not just the most obvious person to be put up there first and foremost. He didn't want to record that song. He was very reluctant to record it. He felt like it was a song that would sort of diminish his legacy, and perhaps in the mind of some jazz purists that's true, but it certainly did not diminish his legacy overall, because it actually brought his voice into really another half century of popular culture. Because actually the song did fine when it came out, but it actually became more popular and became more iconic over time, especially as it was placed in movies, and it became kind of part of the language of American culture. So, he's certainly not the only one who's ever been in a situation where he thought, no, that song is corny, I'm not going to record that, and it ends up being one of the most iconic songs of his career.
What is the significance of the adoption of black music by white artists like Elvis Presley, the Beatles, and the Rolling Stones in terms of the influence of black music in American culture?
How much more time you got?
Perfect.
So this is the question of appropriation and the question of how culture works is an exceptionally complicated one, and it is one where really everybody has their own opinion in the sense that everyone draws their own lines. Everyone sort of makes their own decisions about what they consider appropriation that's acceptable or unacceptable, what is considered cultural mingling and what is considered profiteering off of one form of art or another. So it's a very hard thing to define. But we can start with a couple baseline ideas. One is appropriation has been continuous, long-standing in American culture, where whites have taken innovations that African Americans have made in art and have profited from them, whether directly by being an artist who takes on that appropriation, or indirectly those record label owners whom I was just talking about. The problem is it's too simplistic to just tell the whole story in terms of appropriation, because if you believe, as I do, and as I think most African Americans do, that the music is exceptional and powerful and sophisticated and complex and compelling and tells something about the human condition, not to mention if you want to make money off of it, that you have to accept that it's not yours once it's out there. One of the fundamental elements of, and what I mean by that is not that it's not assigned to African American culture, or it is not owned by African American culture. What I mean is that one of the fundamental elements of black culture is the idea of call and response. That music is not just created in isolation, it's not just an individual experience, it is a communal experience. It comes right out of the church, right? The amens that you hear in the call and response singing. If you believe in the call and response, then the response is part of the dynamic of the art itself. And so if it's exceptional, and if it's part of the call and response, then you have to accept that once white audiences hear black music, they're going to absorb it, they're going to engage in it, they're going to participate and be part of it in some way or another. Now, that doesn't mean we should never call a spade a spade. There are details, and again, this is where the details are important, where they matter. You know, my personal opinion, based on what I know about the history, is that Elvis Presley is a figure who benefits from being white, but who very much had an experience embedded in black culture. And that the primary importance with Elvis is that he placed black culture at the center of American popular music, and that's why he was a threat. Because unlike other artists who might have appropriated it in a kind of tamer way, he brings it to the fore. Now, he's absolutely, even if I believe that as an individual, it was a musical culture that he was very much born into since childhood. That doesn't mean he's not benefiting from being white. Everybody from Sam Phillips at Sun to RCA who signed him, to all those white fans who were out there, essentially made a bet that a white artist performing in a black musical style would sell better and be more famous than a black one, and they were right. And that is about racial bias in America. So there's no easy answer to the I think one of the hardest questions, which is about Elvis. Now, there are other times when it's a much more transparent kind of moment. For example, late 50s, early 1960s, the big new music labels want to get in the rock and roll business, but there's also a reaction to rock and roll and R&B, and a lot of the wildest artists of the 50s find themselves under threat or censure or otherwise are being pushed to the side, right? Elvis goes to the army, Jerry Lee Lewis is Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard kind of gets pushed out and kind of hides in the church, and what you get is a much more kind of toned down, controlled atmosphere. So for example, you get a lot of Italian-American artists who rise to the fore in the late 50s and early 1960s. That was not a coincidence. Though that was the record labels making a very distinct decision that at that time, Italian-Americans would be perceived as just exotic enough to seem like outsiders, but not black. But even here, it gets complicated, because out of that comes some really great artists like Dion, who goes all the way back to the 50s, like Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, right? These are legitimate artists who might have made it anyway. But then there's like Fabian, Frankie Avalon, charming, but artists, you know, and that's where appropriation becomes really significant. Or Pat Boone, right? Very famously going and recording Tutti Frutti, you know, in a way that has the same lyrics, same melodic changes, but none of the soul of the music itself, right? Like that, like all of the sexuality that's in Little Richard's version of Tutti Frutti has been drained by Pat Boone. And yet, this is a real case of appropriation. Pat Boone ends up making 10 times more money than Little Richard did off of that record. Not over time, like eventually, years later, people realize which one you should be listening to. But at the beginning, and he put it out just weeks after Little Richard did, so it eclipsed his on purpose. That's appropriation, you know? So it's a very difficult and complex question to answer, but I hope that helps you think a little bit about the contours of it.
Let's give another big round of applause to Professor Alexander Shashko for today's presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you today for speaking, Professor. We really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone attending my first meeting. Yes, we got through it all together. Hope you're here next week where we hear from Tom Farley on the topic of Growing Up Farley, a story of addiction, love, and forgiveness. We are adjourned.